Hi there. So, do you have that experience of wanting to help, but there is so much going on that you don't know where to start? Or maybe you already do lots, but you're not sure that's enough. So, how do we help people? So, in this special Saturday morning live stream, we're going to be joined by Maitripala, who's a senior ordained member of the Triratna Buddhist Order from Melbourne, Australia. And we're going to be getting her opinions and perspectives on how she has approached these questions over the last 21 years of her spiritual life and time she's been ordained as well. So, a very, very warm welcome to you. My name is Naga, so I'm also an ordained member of the Triratna Buddhist Community, and I'm also the chair of the Brixton Buddhist Centre as well. So, I'm really pleased that you could join us this morning. We're in for a real treat. And what we'll be doing is I'll be introducing Maitripala in a moment, but we'll be having just discussions and questions and explorations. But there's plenty of opportunity for you to get involved as well. So do say hi in the chat room, let us know where you're tuning in from. We'll give you some shout outs. And of course, if you've got any questions during the course of the stream that we can put to Maitripala or me and Maitripala can answer together, then do just don't be shy about putting them in the chat box. I really like to get a bit of interaction going during these live streams. So yeah, I hope you're all doing well. So what we'll begin with is we'll start by saluting the shrine, which is a traditional Buddhist way of turning towards our ideals. So you're very welcome to watch or join in with me when we do that. And then I'm just going to lead us in a few minutes of body awareness just to help us arrive in this on this Saturday morning. And then I'll introduce Maitripala and we'll go from there. So if you want to, you can just join in with me as we salute the shrine. Namo Buddhaya, Namo Dhammaya, Namo Sanghaya, Namo Namah. Om. Good. So now we've turned towards our ideals and our aspirations as represented by the Buddha. We can just start to arrive into our experience a bit more. So what I'm going to invite you to do is just start to turn your attention towards your body, particularly the contact with the ground or the chair, wherever you are. You don't need to sit in any particular position, but just sit fair, get yourself upright, but also relaxed, and just start to tune into those body sensations. So if you want to, you can also close your eyes. And we're just going to take a very quick scan through the body. So with our awareness low in the body, we can just tune into those sensations, particularly of sitting or being supported by the ground. Feeling that solid base of our posture, holding us up. And bringing our awareness a bit higher, particularly to the pelvis and onto our stomachs. Just checking that our stomachs are relaxed and soft. You might feel your diaphragm moving as the air enters your body. Becoming aware of your spine rising up from your pelvis, supporting the upper part of your body. Particularly becoming aware of the shoulders near the top of the spine. You may find if you notice your shoulders are up high or a bit tense or tight, just see if you can let the weight of your arms pull your shoulders down, soften those shoulders. And bring your awareness down your arms, and particularly onto your hands. Usually lots going on in the hands, so you can just spend a bit of time tuning into the sensations in the hands. Perhaps you can feel contact with your other hand as they rest on top of each other, or your clothes. Perhaps you can feel temperature, perhaps your hands are warm or cold. Sensations in the fingertips. And then we can come back up the arms again, back up the body, the shoulders, the spine, the neck, and just noticing the weight of the head on the top of the spine. Coming onto the face, and just checking that we've got a soft face, that we don't need to make any expressions at the moment, we don't need to scrunch up our eyes or wrinkle our foreheads. We can just let those muscles that work so hard to make our expressions to help us communicate, we can just let them soften, let them relax. And then the jaw as well, just making sure the jaw is soft. And then particularly you might like to just tune into the breath as it enters and leaves through your mouth or nose. Don't need to control the breath, you can just watch, just observe the breath as it enters and leaves your body. And then when you're ready, you can just start to relax your attention on the breath. Just bring this short body scan meditation to a close. Great, so if you have tuned in this morning to hear from Maitripala, do say hi in the chat room. We'll give you a little shout out a little bit later on, welcome you onto the stream. I'll just introduce Maitripala now. So I don't know Maitripala all that well, though we have had a really good fortune to come across each other a little bit and get to know each other a little bit more. But she actually she works as well. One of her roles is as what we call a public preceptor in the Triratna Buddhist Community. So that's a body of senior order members, experienced order members, who are mainly responsible for our what we call our ordination process. So this is the process whereby people train, people interested in following the Buddhist path within our tradition undergoes training to become ordained members of the Triratna Buddhist community, which of course is a worldwide community. So we need people like Maitripala around the world to oversee that function. And yeah, I'll let her say a bit more about herself as we go. But I want to welcome her onto the stream now. So a very warm welcome to you, Maitripala. Great to have you here tuning in from Melbourne, Australia.
Lovely to see you again, Viryanaga. Lovely to be here.
Yeah. And me and Maitripala have been, we had a call last week just to sort of go through a bit what we were going to cover on this stream. And I must say it was a really enjoyable discussion, really lovely. I just found you really friendly, Maitripala, friendly and warm and just interested, and also full of really good stories as well. So I've been very much enjoying chatting to you. So yeah, really lovely to have you join us on the stream, and thanks so much as well for just saying yes and being willing to give up your evening in your case to come onto the Brixton Buddhist Community's live stream.
It's lovely to do. Lovely to do. Thank you.
Great. So I wonder if we could just start off. So what we're going to do is we're just going to have discussion. But I wonder if we could just start off by maybe you saying a little bit about yourself. I imagine that not everyone might know you particularly well, particularly given that you're over in Australia. So I wonder if you could just give us a little bit of general background on yourself to start with.
Okay, that's a tall order in a few minutes, but perhaps some of the key things are that I'm a mum of 3 adult daughters, lovely human beings, 8 grandchildren. My sort of past career was working in a primary school for over 20 years, which I loved and found very rewarding work, watching children grow, walking alongside them and watching them reach their potential. And in the last 7 years of that career, I moved into the area of well-being. So mindfulness was coming into schools at that time. By then I was a practicing Buddhist, so I was able to use some of those skills and the sort of things that I'd learned about well-being for both mind and heart, really. I was able to bring those into schools, and children are so open to this way of being with themselves. You can gently lead them there, and they're very open. So it was very rewarding as well. And then at 60, I took a gap year, ran away from my career and went to Triratna for 14 months to work on the team there. That was an ordination training team, and I lived and worked in Wales doing that wonderful work of sharing the Dharma with.
And for those who are not aware, I might just mention that Triratna is a retreat training centre for women, well, particularly in the UK, but also from elsewhere as well.
So this new phase of my life started where I was walking alongside adults, watching them reach their potential, and that's been delightful as well.
Great, good, thank you. So can you, I wonder if, I'm quite interested in how you got involved in the Dharma to start with. Sounds like you've had quite an interesting life in a way. So, you know, it sounds like maybe you started off, well, having, as you said, having a family and having a career as well. So what point did you discover the Dharma? Was that early on or was that later?
No, I was in my 30s, and I think I'd had quite a sort of traditional path for my family anyway, where we chose something that was meaningful in our life to have as a career, and then we got married and had children, and that was very much part of our family clan, a very close, warm-hearted family. So I'd had a very sort of what I would have thought of a fairly sort of easy, loving, cherished life leading up to my 30s. And I was married, and I had 3 children. Everything was going really well. I lived in a lovely place called Emerald in the forest, and then something happened. I was hanging out the washing one morning. I hadn't really ever read anything about Buddhism. I wasn't looking for a religion. I was hanging out the washing, and the dew was glistening on the leaves in the forest. I was surrounded by this forest. I had no particular sense of suffering, and I just had a bit of an epiphany where I knew that I wasn't, that there was more, that I wasn't quite seeing things how they were. I had no idea what that meant. So I won't go into the next 5 years, but basically through a divorce and landing myself in a weekend course that Buddhadasa and Guruvajra, 2 order members, were leading in Brunswick. I went to a weekend workshop on Buddhism, and I knew from that moment that I was a Buddhist, and then I've been living that out over the last 30 years, really, what that means in practice.
That's very, very interesting. And I've heard some other people say sort of similar things in a way that, you know, something has arisen in them and that they've had to respond to it almost despite themselves at times. I don't know if you could say a bit about like how your path has developed. Has it all been sudden jerks, or has it been a gradual deepening, or how has the kind of spiritual life unfolded for you over that time, ever since that epiphany?
I think it's been fairly intensive and direct. I felt once I heard the Dharma that I haven't really let it go, the teachings of the Buddha. And that, I think, was in response to suffering, the suffering that we all experienced, those involved, my family, my partner, myself, in a divorce, which was very, very painful. And basically I didn't quite understand how I'd gone from this heaven realm to such deep suffering of seeing myself and other people suffer and be in pain. So at that point, there was a real quest. I want to actually find out how to be in the world and not cause others pain, and to help people who are causing pain. And the Buddha shows that way, and that's what I've learned over 30 years of looking at his words and his teachings. He shows us the way to actually be able to help those who are suffering, and also to have a creative response to our own suffering. It doesn't stop our suffering, but a creative response to suffering. Yeah. So I was fairly direct, I think, Virian Naga. I did go off on retreats every moment I could, and I took to meditation and really practiced, even if it meant practicing well before the children woke up, or having to balance that.
Yeah. Okay. So, so definitely interested in the area of how you've responded to people suffering, but I just want to explore a bit more personal stuff with you before we go into that kind of bigger area. I particularly just want to draw out a bit about your work at the moment. So a lot of people may not know what a public preceptor is or does particularly. So I wondered if you could just give a little summary of the sort of things that you find yourself doing at the moment. I'm sort of struck that for someone who's had a very heartfelt response to the Dharma, you found yourself with a fair bit of responsibility as well. So I wonder what your take is on that, or what you do with yourself now.
Yes, I do ponder that myself, because I do have an inner forest renunciant part of my being that loves going off on solitaries and being on solitaries, just deepening my meditation practice. And here I am taking on quite a lot of responsibility in the order. And I think it's come about mainly through gratitude. I think it's been a response of gratitude to step up when I'm asked. Not to everything, and I do say no to some things. But when I'm asked, I was asked to be a preceptor by somebody. It took me 2 years to say yes. And then when I was asked to consider joining the college, I had a lot of gratitude for the women who went before me in Australia and New Zealand. Magar in Australia was the only public preceptor. And because of her dedication, my practice could, flower and blossom over those years. And how could I not? In a way, it was a bit along those lines. I certainly didn't have a career path of wanting to join the college, but it just happened out of gratitude. And also, I'm a strong believer in institutions and communities having diversity. And I thought it was good for someone to be in the college who maybe had, been out in a career in the world, had children. Just brings another perspective. And the more perspectives, the more likely we're going to sort of happily share the Dharma with everyone.
Yeah, great, thank you. Yeah, and just for those of you who may not be familiar with the term of the college is just a collection of senior order members drawn from around the world who basically oversee, well, particularly the ordination process. In a way, they safeguard the almost like the quality of people being ordained and make sure that people are fundamentally practicing in the same way throughout the world. Would you summarise it in that way, Maitripala? Would you add anything to that?
It is, in a way. I mean, I suppose I have a felt sense for it of it's something, the order and what the work we're doing in the world is deeply important to me. So, am I willing to step up and sort of help safeguard that work? So sometimes I'm called on to help people when there's disharmony in the community. And other times it's the delightful work, and it's not really work, of walking alongside people who are deepening their practice, who are really practicing and trying to understand how to best unfold their potential. So, yeah.
Great, yeah, that's good. And people may be familiar with Triratna from their local situation, but they may be a bit less familiar with the fact that we're a worldwide kind of community, and that if people are ordained into Triratna wherever they are, whether that's Australia, India, Venezuela, the UK, it's all one community. We're all the same. We're all order members. We're all mitras or whatever. I wondered if you could give a little bit of an outline of some of the activities in Australia that may be a bit unfamiliar, particularly to people in the UK and in Brixton. Just a bit about the structure of Triratna Australia in a way, or the activities of Triratna Australia.
Well, it is one of the delights of being in a community that's worldwide, that when you travel, you can walk into a centre or meet an order member and have things immediately in common that you can talk about and work towards. It's just lovely. That happened when I went to Wales. So in Australia, we're very spread out. So there's a huge country, and we have two main centres, Melbourne and Sydney. And then we have a number of smaller groups spread out throughout the country, places like Brisbane and Port Fairy, Adelaide, Coogee, Toowoomba. So there are order members who have just gone to live in those places and developed a sangha around them by their willingness to share what they've been given by the teachings. I'm not quite sure how many order members we have. If I have a guess, it'll probably be wrong. So, but we are, very spread out, but very close in the sense that many of us have sort of grown up practicing together. So those of us who first came along to centres often end up training together for ordination if we choose that path. There's very, very lifelong friendships in the Sangha. A very close connection with New Zealand as well. We do some of our training together. We do some order events together. So it's a 3.5, 4 hour flight, but they're our neighbours in that sense of Sangha, of community.
I'm just struck by how completely different scale that is to us.
Yes.
3 or 4 hour flight would be like Turkey or something. To sort of think of that as our neighbour in a way. It's just very. I think people don't think of the scale so much. I don't think.
No, that's right. And when I did a sort of a pilgrimage to all the small groups and centres when I got back from Wales, and at some stage I did add up the kilometres and flights, and it was a lot of travelling to go and meet all of the Sangha in a way.
Could you say a little bit about your pilgrimage? I was quite inspired by what you were doing. I thought it was a lovely sort of model you created. I wonder if you could say a few words about what you did and what the idea behind it, or the vision behind it was.
Well, I was coming back from working at the retreat centre in Wales, and I knew my time for going back to school and teaching children was over. I hadn't told anyone that yet, but I just knew there was a new phase coming. But sometimes there's this thing that happens. I think in Buddhism, the term they often use is bardo. It's a space between stages of often birth and death and beyond. But it happens in life, I've found as well, where I need to pause and just see what arises before I know my next main direction. So I decided to do this sort of pilgrimage to Triratna groups and centres so that I had a good sense actually of what was happening across this vast country. And then from that would arise a sense of direction. Where was help needed? How could I best use my skills? But to do it, I decided to ask for donations of little Buddhas from our community around the world. I got over 180 of these little Buddhas, all different sorts, and some very moving stories. I did actually ask in the end for no more to be said. It was supposed to be a 12-month pilgrimage, and what I was doing was taking them with me when I went to sit in town squares or in places where the public was sitting. And I'd do our loving kindness practice, meditation practice, and then just start a conversation with a stranger. And in that time, it would just seem a natural place where I could offer one of these Buddhas, and I would tell them the story of who gave it. It was a way of connecting and testing this Buddhist idea that actually we are all interconnected. We don't always feel it, but we are. And also that we can open our heart to anyone, which we actually practice in one of our meditations, and I wanted to see if it was true. So, I think I've handed all but 30 or so of those Buddhas out, and I can say each of those people that I met was quite a unique, amazing human being. Some very moving communications I had with people, and everyone was happy to take a Buddha. Yeah, so it was drawing connections between people, really, and
Oh, that's fantastic. I particularly love the idea about going out to people and not just, taking our Buddhist principles outwards and just engaging people on the street. I think that's lovely.
Yeah. And then if you do it, you will discover that actually every stranger is just a friend you haven't spent time with yet.
It matches onto the metta bhavana, this loving kindness practice very well, doesn't it? They're just if you do it enough, the stranger becomes the friend eventually, don't they? They morph into that other stage. Yeah,
people told me their hopes and dreams and their fears, and it was very beautiful.
Maybe there's a book in that somewhere, Maitripala.
Someone's told me that. I haven't spent long enough to gather all the stories, because I did take photos of the Buddha in their hands. So there's very beautiful photos of those people, their hands at least with the Buddha.
Good. Okay, so that leads us very nicely into the main theme, if you like, of this stream, which is how to help people. I wonder if we could just start by, there's a coronavirus pandemic going on at the moment, and it's affecting everybody around the world. So what's the, let's just address that first of all. Like, what's been your personal response to that situation, and what's the situation like where you are?
Well, I am, speaking from a place of, we really are of good fortune in a way, in that, I think we have about 7,000 people who've been affected by the virus, and maybe 103 deaths in quite a vast country. Perhaps the fact that we're a large island has helped us in a way in terms of being able to close off any of the flights that were coming in after a certain time. But also there's been a real sense of people working together here in Australia, as in New Zealand, and many other countries as well, but I've sort of witnessed it more closely here, of just doing what's needed, really, to try and lessen the spread. And that seems to have happened. So we are slowly, the restrictions are being loosened up. But the effect of actually the closing down of people's lives, the lives they knew, was still very dramatic. So even though we may not have had the scale in terms of the illnesses to deal with and to be affected by, certainly the rug got pulled out from people, and jobs were lost and lives changed within a week in a way that was quite shocking for some people. So there was a tangible sense also of people struggling within our community, and how to know how to respond to that is quite a practice. There were people who were very lonely and isolated, whose perhaps mental health conditions worsened because they were isolated, or who didn't have enough money for food. Certainly not on a scale like India, but it was still out there. So I was very aware of that, but I was in very good conditions myself.
And what did you observe around you in terms of people's responses? Did people handle it well, or was it marginal and people were really struggling, or was there a range, or how sort of engaged with people?
Yeah, I think it was a range. As you know, for us as Buddhists who've been practicing a long time, there's a degree of relief sometimes when things slow down and we don't have to rush around as much. Although I must say I've found over the second month of the isolation period, because I've been engaged in online activities for Triratna, it's actually got quite busy. And I'm looking forward to a solitary in a month in a short time. But for most people within the Buddhist community, there was a little bit of a sort of, okay, so what will I turn my attention to if I am within these confines? We also have, been reflecting on impermanence, on all sorts of things that perhaps helped us some of us handle that with a bit of ease. And I've even heard people say they're enjoying it. They feel a bit guilty because they're enjoying the simplicity that's come with some of the restrictions. But I also know people within the community, within my family, within the Buddhist community as well, that have struggled and have needed a bit of a hand, a reaching out. And I've seen that done quite beautifully in our own local centre in Melbourne. They had Sangha buddies where people could actually put their hand up and say, I think I'm going to need a little bit more contact. And other people volunteered to do that.
Great. And how have you responded to these needs in a way? Has it all been online stuff that you've been doing, or are there other areas as well that you've been responding to the needs of people at the moment? I
think I did have a sense at first that I could just say yes to what was asked of me in terms of what would be helpful to get our activities online and a retreat, a GFR, a training retreat, to move it from being an in-house retreat to online. But there was also a sort of a nagging sense I had of I wanted to do more for people who perhaps were isolated and struggling. And of course I couldn't go out to houses and get to know people, like on the pilgrimage, get to know strangers and see what they needed. So what I did was I looked at where I was saving some money. I live on, a small bit of support, but I wasn't driving my car, so I had money I would have usually spent on fuel. I wasn't going to cafes to meet people, so I had money that I wasn't spending on meals. So I decided to just put that to good use and donated to the local food bank and donated to the Indian appeals, where there was just a dire need for families that were in very real danger of starving. So that was the way I felt I could do something else that physically I couldn't do. Just be a bit mindful of where I had resources that had appeared and share them. And also within the family, I think, ended up running a meditation night for the family because a family member asked me, and I've never done that before in my 30 years. So that was lovely. That's something that came out of the situation.
Great. I mean, I'm interested in asking you a bit about your family in a moment, but I feel like we should probably just mention how you're supported at the moment as well. So you're supported by another Buddhist charity called FutureDharma Fund, or at least part of your support, as far as I'm aware, comes from that. So I also, one of my other roles is also as I used to be a programs manager for the FutureDharma Fund. So it was lovely to, we basically got this application from Maitripala some years ago saying, hey, look, there's all this work that could be done. I just need a bit of help to get to retirement, as far as I understand. That was the situation. And we were able to respond to that in a really in a really positive way. And so I just get the sense of this lovely kind of circle of generosity. So I guess I feel a bit personally invested in some of the work that you do, because it's sort of like we've been able to support you, and you've been able to support other people, and it's just this lovely circle of generosity, I think, and it just seems to be all the work you do, I know helps a lot of people. So,
oh, that's just such a lovely way of explaining it. It's exactly how it actually feels, how I sense it. If people gave donations to the Future Dharma Fund, some of those donations were then handed to me so that I could leave my paid work and do this work. And, you know, some people are benefiting from that. And so there's this circle. And, yeah, it's a lovely way of explaining it. Thank you.
Yeah, pleasure. Yeah, and maybe just to say, for people who aren't familiar with Future Dharma Fund, we'll put a link in the description so you can look at the website if you're interested in the other projects that Future Dharma Fund is supporting, particularly in India at the moment in this difficult time.
Definitely, yeah.
Okay, so just to go a little bit back to in terms of your helping. So there's this bit of this question around at the moment in how effective is online Dharma teaching at the moment? You know, we don't have much other option in a way, but is that, I don't know about you, but I experience it both as very supportive, but also slightly draining just to be online so much. I don't know if you've got a sense of whether that form of helping is what its value or what its strengths and weaknesses are, perhaps.
Sure. I mean, my recent experience of taking a training retreat online definitely taught us a few things, because I think we had 50% more people could book onto that retreat online. We were calling it a non-retreat, but we had to drop that after a while because the feedback was that people felt like they were on a retreat because of the activities we were offering and how they engaged with it. It was far more effective than the participants or the team running it thought it was going to be. So that surprised us. And the fact that over 50% more people had access, so these were people who perhaps had ill health, who may have had work commitments, which meant they couldn't get away for the full retreat we were going to be holding. They may have had children. So some of our sessions we did at night so that, you know, people could be in that particular group after their children were in bed. So it did actually give a lot more access, and it showed us that people who weren't coming along to some things, it wasn't just because they didn't want to be there. You know, they actually had things in the way. So it's given our team a lot to think about what we'll do once we're back to running retreats at retreat centres. Could we offer something once a year for carers, you know, specifically targeted in a way which makes it more accessible. Yeah, I'd like to see the mix, actually, when you say what are the pros and cons. I have found many hours of Zoom quite tiring in a particular way, yeah. But I'm very pleased we've been doing it.
I mean, I think we found the same thing here. It's certainly opened the doors a bit to people who maybe couldn't make some of our classes for you know, no fault of their own. So it's clear that we're going to need some sort of to combine both going forward, I think. Yeah, great. So I'm also very interested in hearing about your family as well. So sometimes I think there can be a bit of a view around that family life is a bit incompatible with a very serious, ardent spiritual life. You would seem to suggest otherwise, just by your lived experience. I wonder if you could say a little bit about that, or maybe the balance to you or the responses of your family about you being a spiritual practitioner.
Well, it's very much was something that just slowly evolved, this idea of balance. I never thought they wouldn't both be possible in my life. Once I'd connected with a spiritual framework or a value-based framework that was based in what the Buddha had learnt and shared, I wasn't going to let that go. And I certainly wasn't going to let my responsibilities to my family go. And that's as much as about what I get out of it too. I mean, you know, it's just a delight and love that comes about from helping your children grow, grandchildren, seeing them grow as well. Buddhism's allowed that sense of not having a complete attachment on that and seeing that in a much sort of looser but richer way. So there's a whole way, I think, my practice made me a better parent, which is a whole other talk probably, but I truly believe it did. I'm so grateful for my involvement in the teachings, for what it gave me as a parent. And my daughters are in their 30s, and they feed that back to me now, that they're very, very happy that I have something that's held so much meaning for me, and that they see that is so helpful for me, for them, and for others. And they're very active in giving that feedback, actually. Maybe as teenagers, they weren't as keen when I went off on retreats, and perhaps they wanted a new pair of jeans that we weren't paying for. Or there were little bumps along the way, but I think that's pretty normal. Yeah, no, they definitely can fit together, but it is a balance, and sometimes you have to be prepared to miss out on things. So you may miss out on an important family event, or you may miss out on a retreat you really want to go to, and you just are constantly checking in with what feels the most effective decision when you come to those choices.
And how have you found that in terms of taking responsibility? Like, as you join the college, have you found that organisation has been supportive of you and your, the fact that you've got children as well and you need to engage with family commitments? How's that been for you?
Yeah, look, very, very supportive. In the early days, I used to read some of the teachings and think, I should keep my family a bit secret. Not secret, but sort of the importance of them in my life. I wasn't quite sure how to talk about that. Those days are gone, in terms of, many people are practicing within family contexts and learning how to do that effectively. But it is a stretch, I don't sort of want to make it all seem light and easy. It is a stretch at times, but you learn from that stretch. But yeah, I feel if I stay in touch with what's really important for me, and I communicate that clearly and with a sense of the heart behind it, that people have just responded, whether it's other college members or members of my chapter or the order, friends in my community. They've all been very, very supportive, as have my children. Yeah.
I was delighted to hear that you're teaching actually meditation to your children, aren't you, or to your family? Do you want to just say a little bit about that? I thought that was lovely.
Well, I made a point. My children were sort of 8 and 10, 6, that sort of primary school age when I became involved, and I made an early decision not to sort of put Buddhism on them in any way. So they're not Buddhists, but gosh, they're lovely human beings. And I think perhaps me having access to the teachings might have contributed a little bit to that. So they definitely, have values that are about care and kindness of others and so on. I'm not sure. I've forgotten what you.
Well, you mentioned in our little pre-meeting, you mentioned that you had a family session, a family Zoom meditation session.
Sorry, yes, I'd lost that thread. Yeah, so one of my daughters, they're now young mothers themselves in their 30s, busy lives, of a lot of stresses. So one of them did ask, could I run a meditation session during isolation? And so I started, and we decided just to put the invitation out to the extended family, and whoever wanted to zoomed in for that. A simple body-led meditation with a bit of connecting into kindness and perhaps a broader perspective of life. And then they would go off to sleep, and they loved it, and they wanted to keep going.
Great, good. Okay, so maybe it's very, very, very nice to hear from you so far, Maitripala. So maybe now would be a good point to pause for some questions from the community, from the chat room. I'll just say a few shout outs, but then if you've got any questions, do type them into the chat box and I'll put them to Maitripala on your behalf. So just to see who we've got tuning in. So we've got Amalavadra from Somerset. He says hi. We've got Lynn from Trowbridge in Wiltshire. She's really been looking forward to the talk. Charlotte from Brixton, she's very delighted that you're on the stream. We've got Tony from New Zealand saying hello from New Zealand to you, Maitripala. And Amladana, he's from Forest Hill, he's been enjoying the interview. And oh yeah, Lynn has got a few comments as well. So if you've got comments or questions that you'd like me to put to Maitripala, you can ask her anything. I'm sure she'd be happy to field whatever. Just type them into the chat box, and I'll put them to her in a moment. So just for the minute, Maitripala, I'm just going to let you go, and I'm just going to do say a little announcement, and then I'll bring you back on shortly. So let's go over to, well, anyway, so I'm just going to, basically as a part of our normal streams, we always do a Dharma an appeal for donations. So each month we need to raise £2,000 to keep all of these streams online and all our activities going. And you've been really generous this month. So we've got £1,682 this month. So thank you so much for everybody who's given. But we're nearly there, just looking for another £318. There's 2 days left. So let's see if we can do it, guys. Let's see if we can raise that £2,000 for the month. And that goes towards basically supporting the activities, the online activities. And actually, it's looking like we're going to get to do some physical activities before too long as well. So we're just planning for that as well. So you're just contributing to helping all of these activities continue. And just a couple of very personal thanks to people who have given since the last stream on Wednesday. So Lauren A, Chris B and Sammy M all gave one-off gifts to the Brixton Buddhist Community. So thank you very much to you three in particular. And I will be doing a thank you at the end of the month for everyone who has given this month. Okay, and if you to give, just find the link in the description. So if you just look in the description box, you'll find the link, and that'll take you to our donate page. Okay, so let's bring Maitripala back on. So welcome back, Maitripala. So let's okay, so let's hear. I've got a few questions for you. So Charlotte says it would be lovely to hear about why your kesa is a different colour to Viryanaga's and what that means for you today.
Yes, okay, so you've got a white kesa, I've got a gold kesa, and I had a white kesa for most of my order life. So this particular kesa represents the decision I've made to simplify my life in terms of being careerless, of actually making my work with Triratna in a way what I focus on, and simplicity of possessions as well as taking a vow of chastity, celibacy. And I've lived like that actually for quite a long time. And I never really felt the need to take the kesa, the gold kesa. I didn't need an external thing to show how I wanted to live. But just a couple of years ago, I thought that things were changing within our order in a way. A lot more people are operating out of family situations, and thankfully feel really encouraged to express their practice through their whatever their work is and so on. And many people are living in family style lifestyles now. And I just thought it was good to actually have diversity and to show that someone can be very, very content, which I am, living this way with few possessions, without a career and without a partner. And I feel very, very deeply happy. And that I thought, actually, I'm happy to say that. I'm happy to show that. It's just a different way of living, perhaps, to the majority of people now. Mm.
And maybe I can just make a few comments as well. I mean, I really like the fact that our order has that diversity. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the Triratna Buddhist order, we're a non-monastic tradition, but ordination is still a very serious commitment in a way. And we're also a non, we're not a celibate tradition necessarily, but that is an option for people. So I personally really like the fact that people are free to engage or take commitments depending on what most moves them and what is most spiritually valuable. I really appreciate that diversity within our community.
Absolutely.
Great. Jill's tuned in, so just a shout out to you, Jill. Thanks for joining us. And we've got a question from Amalavajra and Maitripala. He says, Maitripala, is there a Dharma teaching or practice that you are especially reflecting on or exploring at the moment?
Yes, so one rich thread for me is a sutta, an early sutta, and it's the Satipatthana Sutta. So it's a mindfulness sutta, but it's much more than that. It's very, very deep. And personally, I've been exploring that particular way of practicing and teaching. But in terms of what's happening in the world at the moment, I think just really, really grateful for what I've already been given in my practice as a Buddhist, in terms of focusing on awareness and kindness as core important practices, really. So really reflecting on impermanence and reflecting on how I can best respond to the unsatisfactoriness of what's going on. So in a way, using the really core teachings have come to the fore right now. Yeah, it's like I don't really need anything majorly new right now. It's just to put those into practice.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just amazing how quite simple teachings can just bubble up at the moment and take on new kind of relevance, isn't it? I've been finding that as well.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Great. So there's no more questions from the chat room at the moment. If you do have anything else, let me know. And we've got a bit more time for Maitripala to answer them. So maybe I'll just pitch you another question or two, Maitripala. Taking this general sense of how people can help at the moment, and they're probably in a range of situations. Some of them are probably in family situations. Other people are maybe isolated on their own, and maybe they're just discovering meditation for the first time, or maybe they've been Buddhist practitioners for a while now. What would you have any advice or tips about how people might be able to help and respond at the moment, at the current time? I mean, maybe particularly now, or even just generally. What would you say to that?
Well, I think we have to start with ourselves first, and just try and be as aware as we can to what actually is our experience. So we're very, very good at avoiding often our own experience. We can sort of go to two poles, either go into denial and distraction because it's all a bit too hard, or we're actually not really sure we want to feel what we might be feeling, or we can get fixated really on the emotions of what's going on and get into a bit of horrified anxiety. So we can sort of swing to those poles. So I think the first thing to do before we do anything for ourselves or anyone else is to actually get connected to what's going on and just be really authentic and honest about what it is, what's actually happening in our experience. So start with awareness, and from that, kindness comes. And I think usually a clarity of knowing what's needed. Do you need to guard the gates of your senses a little bit and maybe not be looking at the news as much if it's actually making you feel a bit stuck and horrified? Simple things like that, really. And if you keep thinking about the person across the road and wondering if they're okay, letting an action come from that awareness of the feeling.
Great, yeah, thank you. And then I wonder if we can say a little bit about that horrified anxiety, because I know that quite a few people probably experience that. That sense of either God, it's all terrible, or I'm in danger personally, or it's all so bad I don't know how to respond, or I don't know how to kind of get going. I certainly have experienced both of those emotions at times. How can people engage with that? How can people work with that if they're feeling a bit overwhelmed with anxiety or something like that?
Well, obviously, as a meditation teacher, I would say, if you can, even if it's led meditations, someone else leading you through a body scan, you meet so much that you're avoiding if you're staying up in your head, even just coming into the belly, the breath. These are sort of well-known techniques now for actually being present. So we need some sense of grounded presence. So being in the body, I find walking in nature, if it's at all possible, somehow makes the perspective of my head world of worry just a little bit easier to expand out of. So trying to actually get that perspective a little bit wider than just what's in front of us at that moment. So yeah, using body scans and awareness, I think, is a good place to start. And then being honest. I keep going back to this, just saying, actually, I don't feel great today. I feel really jangled today. I feel snappy with the kids, and there's something else going on. I don't even know what it is. But actually being able to be honest about that and maybe communicating it to a loved one can be a really good start, because it's present then. And more of us is present to know what to do next.
Yeah, thanks. And what about the criticism that's sometimes levelled at Buddhism, that it's all about ourself, it's a bit selfish, or it's a bit navel-gazing is the term you sometimes hear, isn't it? So spending all that time looking inside rather than, I don't know, going delivering food parcels or whatever. How would you respond to that sort of criticism?
Well, I think it will be evident in the practice. I mean, I haven't been able to sort of sit with what's really going on for me without it having some sort of outward expression. So if we're suppressing that, then we're not actually truly looking at what's going on. We're not touching the emotions. We're actually we might be focusing on the breath in a very narrow way, but we're not touching the heart. We're not allowing that breath to touch the heart. And we might not be acknowledging that we're having rotten days as well, or we're angry, or all of those things we might not think Buddhists feel, but they do. So it's a bit like, if an action isn't coming from it, and I don't mean being on the front line action necessarily, but some small action, even if it's bringing people to mind. I mean, I found these virtual hugs that are quite lovely, that actually say, you may not feel this, but this is a hug. Can you feel it? And it contracts. So, when someone had come to mind that I thought might be struggling a bit more than usual, I'd send them one. I printed them off and pasted them in a card and sent, here's your hug. It doesn't have to be very big, does it? To actually, if you think about what we enjoy, it doesn't have to be very big. If someone just sends us a message of say, hey, I'm thinking of you, something happens in us. So, yeah, I think we can get caught up into thinking we either have to act or it's just all too big, so let's just go back to meditation. But I'd say respond to those natural kind urges that are there. Actually do them, even if you feel a little bit shy about it.
And it's amazing how those small actions make such a huge difference, don't they? I mean, very, very tiny things really actually do alleviate people's suffering.
Yeah. And do trust that intuitive sense. I think it took me 10 years to really start to listen to when someone would come to mind. And I just didn't quite trust it. It was a bit like it was manifested or something, but now it feels very natural. If they come into my awareness, then there's an action, and it might be just a thought. It might be just wishing them well, or there may be something else I can do, like send flowers or something like that.
Great, wonderful. Okay, so we're coming to the end of our time in this interview. I just wondered if you had anything you wanted to close with, or any other thoughts that we haven't had a chance to talk about on the stream that you wanted to mention.
I think one of the gifts that Buddhist practice has given me is the understanding that actually things happen arising due to the conditions that come beforehand. So I don't see the virus as an enemy. The virus has emerged through various conditions, and potentially you can change some of those conditions. But there's a certain amount of living in a human world in life that just happens, and to accept that, and some of that will be pleasant and some will be unpleasant. But we do have choice. There is a moment of choice. And I think this is the great freedom. So we may feel the unsatisfactoriness of something, but how we respond is a choice. And practices like meditation and friendship, where you can talk about these things when we don't live up to our values, they can help change what choices we make. Choice is possible for everyone, but we can't necessarily stop bad things happening in that sense that some people say, why is this happening? So there's something about that that I think is really worth reflecting on, and I'm so glad that the teachings do ask us to reflect on them regularly, because things aren't such a shock. It's just like, oh yes, now this, and how can I respond?
You get sort of, you can be resourced, can't you, to deal with those things as they come up.
Oh, beautifully so. You know, I feel very, very grateful for that. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Maitripala, for joining us. I felt that's been I feel like I've got a real sense of you and your practice. Yeah, it's just in a certain way, we call this How You Can Help, because I just get a sense of you as a very responsive person in a way, you know, very somebody with real spiritual depth, but also just somebody who's able to be quite light and responsive. So it's been really lovely to hear from you. Thank you so much for joining us. And also just rather, for me, demonstrating the sense of the interconnectedness, well, generally maybe of humans around the world, but particularly also within Triratna, and how we're one community. I love the fact I can just zoom you in from Melbourne and we can have a chat live on air. You know, here I am in Brixton, so that's just absolutely wonderful, and you know, have the same language and the same experiences as well.
It is.
Go on, sorry.
I was just saying we're very blessed, and I'm grateful for that, to be part of this community, but also for that community to have this bigger vision of actually just being helpful and to share with anybody. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. So yeah, so I'm sure everyone's really appreciated, well, everyone has really appreciated your talk, Maitripala. So for anyone that's tuned in, you're very welcome to continue the discussion on. So we'll have a Zoom discussion after this, which you can join, and we can just explore some of the themes that Maitripala has mentioned. So that will be starting in about 15 minutes. So you've got a bit of time to get yourself a cup of tea, go to the bathroom, etc. And you'll find the link to that in the description box. And in the chat room as well, so you can I'll be on that on that Zoom call, so you're very welcome to just join in, and we can have a bit more of a chat about it. And just to say also, we've got lots more activities coming up next week. So on Monday, Maitripala will be continuing with our theme of meditation practice and meditation exploration. And on Tuesday, we've got a new course starting, new meditation course called Meditate with Confidence, particularly aimed at newer people to meditation, led by Charlotte and Maitrinita. So if you've got family members, just like Maitripala, who you think might really benefit from learning a bit of meditation during this lockdown, this is a perfect course for them. So again, you should find that link in the description. And we run all of our courses by donations. So if you are in financial hardship, you need not give any money to that at all. You can just get your friends and family on that course if you think they'd benefit. So that's all from me. Yeah, just thank you once again, Maitripala, for tuning in. Really lovely to speak with you.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure to be here and joining your community.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so you're off to bed now, aren't you? And I'm off to have the rest of the day.
Yes. So enjoy your discussion, and yes, perhaps you'll zoom into Australia sometime.
Oh, I'd love to. Yeah. Okay, take care of yourself. Bye-bye, Maitripala. Bye-bye.
Bye.